Jen and Cam are two funny ladies who like to talk about murder, mass murder, murder-suicide, serial killers, spree killers, thrill killers, contract killings, honor killings, and a whole lot of other shit too heinous for me to list here. If you're disturbed by this sort of content, you may want to listen to something else. And if you're a child trying to listen to our true crime podcast, well, you better ask your mama.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how are ya?
I'm pretty okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
For asking. You're welcome.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's we were recording this on the Sunday where daylight savings time has occurred. So we're a little bit out of whack. But it's as the rest of the world that celebrates daylight savings time. Do we really celebrate it, though?
No. I don't think so.
Anyway, I heard you have a long episode for us. Yes.
It's not that long, but it did take place long ago. Well,
really long ago.
That long ago, but
it seems like years.
It does. It's
decades.
Yeah. I would say
decades.
This would be one of the big cases that initially brought a lot of attention to true crime, I would say.
Okay, let's hear it then.
One of those.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. It's Thursday, May 19th, 1983. It's 10:48 p.m. when a red Nissan pulled up to the McKenzie-Willamette Hospital emergency room drop-off door, honking the horn repeatedly. A blonde woman hops out of the car, screaming for help, and points to her car. "Someone shot my kid," she yelled. Nurses Rose Martin and Shelby ran to the car and were momentarily stunned, noticing all the blood inside the car. Inside, there were 3 small children, 1 in the front seat and 2 in the back seat. When confronted with what was in front of them, hospital staff were called to come back into the ER to help assist. Dr. John Mackey, the physician in charge that night, called the hospital's #1 surgeon, Dr. Whilhite, to come back to work because it was bad. It was really bad. Chest wounds to children, and their conditions were grave. The girl in the front seat seemed to already be gone, but the ER staff tried desperately to bring her back to life, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead in the ER. While the 2 in the back seat were still alive, they were struggling to breathe. The staff continued to try to save the other 2 children. They were not sure if they could be saved. With the gunshot wounds, each had severe loss of blood. To try to make breathing better for each of them, they were given a tracheotomy. So far, what they were doing was working. The children were alive and for the moment seemed to be stable. What was more important was why anyone would do this, and more importantly, who. Their mother, Diane, would explain that she and the kids were driving home from a friend's house when a man, a, quote, bushy-haired stranger, end quote, had flagged their car down as they were on their way home. Diane said she pulled over and stopped, thinking the man may be in trouble and needed help. But instead, Diane said he approached the car, put a gun in the car window, and shot each of her children. Both Springfield and Lane County police were called to the hospital. After speaking with Diane, they determined the incident occurred near Old Mohawk Road and Marcola, and a manhunt was launched. Authorities hoped that they could get the man before he attacked again. Sergeant Robin Rutherford was the first to speak with Diane in the hospital. He immediately noted how calm she seemed. I mean, seeing as how she had just witnessed all 3 of her children being shot in front of her. Diane only suffered a few minor wounds to her hands and arms as she was trying to fight off the gunman. Sergeant Rutherford asked Diane to show him exactly where the bushy-haired man shot her children. Diane was able to identify the exact spot of the attack, a rather unique thing given how upset one would assume you'd be after witnessing such a horrible thing to the greatest loves of your life. When Diane returned to the hospital, the doctor had given her the horrible news. Her middle child, Cheryl Ann Down, age 7, had died as a result of her injuries. The older child, 8-year-old Christy, and the youngest child, 3-year-old Danny, were both struggling but alive and stable for the moment. Diane accepted the news with, shall I say, a bit of a carefree attitude, even commenting in regard to Danny. "Do you mean the bullet missed his heart? Gee whiz." That's her own kid. Detectives are now beginning to see that there's much more to the story than she's saying, and they take her into the room. They take her into a quiet room in the hospital for a little chat. The detectives, named Doug Welsh and Dick Tracy, not kidding about that, Dick Tracy. I thought that was funny because he's a detective.
He is.
Dick Tracy. Found Diane to be way too calm considering what she went through. So they began with getting some details. Diane Downs was a 27-year-old postal employee. She actually used to work for the post office in Chandler, Arizona, and she had lived there with her first husband, Steve Downs. The couple had recently divorced, and Diane was given a transfer, so her and the kids moved to Oregon, which was where her parents lived, and she moved up there to be closer to them. Now, according to Diane, the evening's events unfolded like this. Diane and the kids had dinner at home that night in Springfield. They all left to go to a friend's home. Her name was Heather, and she actually worked with Diane. Now, once at Heather's home, Diane had a quick chat with her and her husband before getting back into the car to drive home. Basically, she had found some property that she thought Heather would be interested in. It was a horse property, and Heather was kind of looking for, a property to purchase. And so Diane found one and drove it out to her house. So Diane had a quick chat with Heather and Heather's husband before getting back in the car to drive back home. Diane tells officers she decided to take a back way home that night, which was Old Mohawk Road, a dark, desolate road where she ran into the suspect. Diane described the man as white, in his late 20s, about 5'9", 150 to 170 pounds, dark hair, a shag, wavy cut, and a stubble of a beard. He wore a Levi jacket and an off-colored T-shirt. Diane said that she stopped and got out of the car. After doing this, the stranger pulled out a pistol and demanded her car. Diane said she would not give him the keys, and then he reached into the car, through the driver's window, and started shooting into the car. As he was doing this, she started to fight with him, but she made it back into the car. However, once she was in the car, he fired another shot, hitting Diane in the arm. She hit the gas and drove straight to the hospital. Diane's arm injury was, according to her hospital report, a single bullet entered her left forearm. It split in two as it shattered the radius and then exited, leaving 2 smaller wounds. Detective Tracy thought this injury was a little bit familiar because in past cases he had worked, this was the exact same injury that other people suffered when they injured themselves but claimed another person did it. In other words, this was a wound that was self-inflicted, which makes sense because if you're right-handed, you would
have to go. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
it would be kind of hard to pull the trigger.
Yeah, and
it depends on how
you definitely
tough it is, but
want it to be fatal. Investigators were able to determine that the shots had been fired through the driver's side window by a .22 caliber handgun or possibly a rifle. There were powder burns on the skin of each of the children, indicating the gun was fired close to them, so at close range. Cheryl, who was in the front seat, had more burn marks than the children in the back seat. Diane would tell police that she owned 2 guns, a .22 caliber rifle and a .38 caliber pistol, but neither had been used lately. They were tested, and it had been determined that neither had been shot recently. Diane agreed to sign a search warrant for her home. The red Nissan was taken into custody to examine for more evidence. The police went to check in with Heather to make sure that Diane did in fact go by her house, and Heather confirmed that they did come by for about 15 minutes that night. At the scene of the crime, police worked to try and recover the murder weapon, or at least a few spent shell casings. The gun was not located even after checking the Mohawk River for the gun, but they did find some spent .22 caliber shells near the location that Diane had said the event happened. Now, about this time, I'm going to say suspicions were starting to stir. One such instance was when Diane was allowed to go and see her daughter, Christy. Now, just picture this, because this made my heart drop. A nurse on duty noticed not love in little Christy's eyes, but fear when her mom came into the room. Utter fear. Also, her heart rate spiked. Now, this is a strange response if you think about it from a little girl who's alone in this big, scary hospital, and her mom comes in to see her for the first time.
Yep, you would think the opposite would happen. Yeah.
Yes. Red, not even flags. I'd say giant red sirens should be going off. Also,
can sirens be red, though, Camille?
Red sirens.
Is that the...
I'm like police sirens. Woo, 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 police sirens. Not
Gotcha.
Woo, not that
okay.
kind.
Okay.
In my mind, it all makes sense.
I know.
If you lived here with me, in my head, you'd know. Also, just a little note, Diane never shed a single tear when seeing her daughter in bed, hooked up to all those machines and wires, helping to keep her alive. Now, this is after this major incident. And as a mother, you don't cry? Like, you don't, I just don't, no.
You have to have at least some emotion, I would think. I mean, maybe
this
she's...
first time seeing your baby after she was shot. She's hooked up to all these life-saving machines
in a hospital bed. I get what you're saying. People do really react differently, but yes, for not having any show of emotion would be very odd.
She needs those big red sirens going off again is what needs to happen.
I wish I could hear sound like you. Or hear color.
I do. To make things even worse, little Christy had suffered a stroke. Her speech was affected, and doctors thought she might never be able to speak again. Hope was that because Christy was so young, that she would be able to regain speech, but only time at this point would be able to say. District Attorney Fred Hughey felt something was not right. Now he's, he heard about this case, he's coming in, and he's already, something's not right. So of course, because he's an attorney, and that's what they do, he's already thinking that there's going to be some sort of trial in the future, so he's setting up things just in case. He had that sense, and, he didn't want to make any mistakes. He wanted this to all go the way it should. So first, which is pretty crazy, he demands that a guard is placed with the children 24 hours a day. So they are basically on lockdown with a, officer by their side to make sure nothing would happen to the children, hoping one day they could tell their story. He also hired a child psychologist to work with Christy and build a rapport that would hopefully eventually lead to the child trusting her enough to share what happened that scary night. As the investigation was moving along, police learned that Diane actually owned 3 guns. That's right, she neglected to mention that. The other gun was a .22 caliber handgun, like the one used in the shooting of the children. Now, they only learned this after interviewing her ex-husband, Steve. Diane's story started to change ever so slightly, little details to big details. Investigators learned that Diane liked men, like a lot of men, especially married men, a lot of them. Which is fine, totally fine. Probably fine that she likes men. It's not so cool that she likes married men. But one such man was a man that Diane worked with at the Chandler, Arizona post office. Now, the man was separated from his wife when he and Diane saw each other. So they were separated, this married man and his wife, but they were not yet divorced. Now, in a lot of stuff, it does not give his name, like purposely says a man. I think a couple things I read gave him a fake name. However, in an interview with Oprah, which I watched because it just took me back. This is crazy. Like, Oprah's hair was out of control. It was huge. It was amazing.
It was the 80s.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I was just like, oh.
Everybody's hair was out of control.
It really
and
was.
And with the shoulder, you had to be at least as wide as your shoulder pads were. So
bigger,
there you go.
Right?
Yeah.
So anyway, but his last name, I believe, was Knickerbocker, but he went by Nick. Or Nick. He went by Nick. So, and she did say that in the Oprah interview. So from here on out, that's what I'm going to call him. Okay? Nick.
Okay. So you're outing him.
Well, just Nick.
Okay.
Diane and Nick broke up, and then Diane moved to Oregon. And during that time, the man reconciled with his wife. He got back together with his wife. Now, Diane, they were broke up, but Diane was still madly in love with him. She wanted him back desperately. Even though the man made it perfectly clear he did not want to be with her, he wanted to be back with his wife. In fact, she, last big fights, and I talk about it in a little bit, was she said, "Who do you love more, me or your wife?" And he says, "My wife." Well, that's going to put a little damper on the relationship. But the other thing that the man made perfectly clear to Diane was that he did not in any way whatsoever want to be a father, especially a father to another man's children. Now, of course, when police asked Steve if he believed Diane could have harmed her children in order to get this man back, Steve said absolutely not, that Diane loved the kids. But then again, Susan Smith's ex-husband said the same thing, if you remember, because it's not natural to harm your own children. Police confronted Diane with the information that she owned another gun that she just, forgot to mention to them. She, of course, denied it. Now, her lover, Nick, would say the same thing. So Nick and Steve both confirmed she had another gun. But okay. During this time, the car's evidence results come back in, and whew, is it telling? Let me tell you. There were no bullet holes in the car. So this random, bushy-haired stranger shot into the car and hit the children without a single miss.
Perfect aim. Yeah.
Perfect aim. Which is odd because you would imagine he'd be super nervous doing that. There was blood in various spots in the car, but strangely, there was no blood on the driver's side or the steering wheel. Now, this is odd because if Diane was shot, you're going to be driving probably with your one hand that's not shot. But, part of human nature is when you're injured, you automatically grab it. You touch yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like, so if she was shot in the arm, her other hand would have cradled her injured arm. And then that hand, should have blood on it. And then that would be on the steering wheel. But none. There was none. Also, odd, she wrapped her arm in a towel that she had in the car because she didn't want blood to get everywhere. So
blood. She didn't want her blood to get anywhere.
Thank you. And that's what I put here. Interesting to note that she wrapped her own arm, but did not use the towel on, I don't know, one
Any
of her
the kids
children.
To stop the blood? No.
Exactly.
To try to dress the wound and stop it? Yeah. She thought of herself first.
There was also no gunpowder particles found in the driver's seat. There was gunpowder residue found in parts of the car where the children were shot. All of this leads detectives to believe whoever shot Diane was sitting in the driver's seat when they shot her, or she shot herself. See what I'm saying? That's
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, being sarcastic there. There is also all of Diane's journaling and letters. In Diane's home, investigators found some letters that helped build a motive. One such letter was written as if it was going to her old Arizona love. In the letter, dated April 21st, this is only about a month before the crime, and this is what she says. What happened? I'm so confused. What could she have said or done to make you act this way? I spoke to you this morning for the last time. It broke my heart to hear you say, "Don't call our right." I still think of you as my best friend and my only lover, which, yeah, she had lots. And you keep telling me to go away and find somebody else. You have got to be kidding.
Only lover at that moment, maybe.
In another passage in one of the letters, I love you more than your wife, yet it's brought sorrow to my life. I just keep hoping and hanging on. How much longer can I be strong?
She's a poet then, too.
Well, this was also near some, let's say, how do I even phrase this? Because, we have children listening sometimes. Well, teenagers. She also did some poetry of
erotica.
Yeah, sort of. Yes. There you go. So when she would touch herself and think of him, okay, put it that way. So she did some poetry of that sort, and I was like, I'm
the divinals type.
Yes,
stuff.
There you go. Detectives are now wondering if Diane felt that if she got rid of one thing this man did not want, which was her children, would she be able to get the love of her life back? Worse yet, now detectives are wondering if this man is somehow involved in this whole plot. Did he have something to do with Diane's children being shot? He doesn't,
Jesus.
By the way.
I so don't understand the thinking of these women like Susan Smith and her. No one's worth, yeah, your children, losing your children, killing your children. Yeah. All right.
I know. I can't even.
No other human is worth it.
At this time, detectives now know that they need to find Nick and have a little sit down because he's got some splaining to do. They need to know his side of the story and if he did have anything at all whatsoever to do with this horrible, horrible crime. Investigators Paul Alton and Doug Welch went to Chandler, Arizona, to talk to the love of Diane Downs' life, as well as find out what they could to get, a better idea of the kind of person Diane Downs was or is. When they go to the man's house, he wants his wife by his side for the interview. Now, this is pretty, telling about him because, some of the stuff they're going to dive into is a little sensitive in nature, being like their love affair. And so that's kind of interesting that he would demand his wife be by his side. Obviously, she knew all this. He came
clean, yeah.
Yeah.
He was protecting his ass.
So the man said that he met Diane in 1981 while at work. Even though she was divorced from Steve, he was still with his wife. He said he was taken immediately by Diane. He had never known a woman like her, the scantily clad clothes she wore, to the openness with her talk of sex and her body. He said he had known that she had been with a lot of men, but he really believed this would just be a fling, something fun to do. But as the months went on, she was still clinging to him. He didn't want this, and he didn't really know how to get rid of her, to be honest. Then the man, known as Nick, said something that confirmed their suspicions. While Diane was in love, he was in it only for what it was, a fling. He told Diane that he would not see her with the children around. He didn't want to be any part of that. Meaning, I didn't know how to get this. He didn't want to hang out with her when she had the kids. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to be in their life and vice versa, which I get that, especially.
Did he already have a family? I mean, if he's just wanting it sex.
Yeah. That's all he wanted was sex. That was it.
He's got the family life. He just wants.
Right now, that's just put that little, the police are getting,
That's the information police
it's
have.
All becoming more clear. The affair came to a screeching halt one night in 1983, and I kind of mentioned this earlier. Diane had asked him who he loved more, his wife or her. He said his wife, and Diane lost it. He left to go home, and Diane followed him home, began banging on the front door, calling him on the phone. When she finally left, Diane that is, she returned to the home the next day, and his wife answered the door. Now, Diane proceeded to tell the wife about her marriage, what her husband was doing, and that she should leave him and whatever. So the wife, of course, was angry and slams the door on her. Elizabeth Diane Downs was born August 7th, 1955 in Phoenix, Arizona. As Elizabeth grew up, she started going by Diane. Now, Diane was a smart kid, but not one of the popular kids. Her parents, who were devout Baptist, refused to buy Diane the latest cool clothing, cool shoes, it's the 80s, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So she never really fit in that way. A lot of the stuff I got from this is, I said earlier, the Oprah interview. I watched a couple of them. But also Ann Rule's book about Diane Downs named Small Sacrifices. And that's why I said I think this was one of the first books to kind of, dive into true crime and make it very consuming, I guess, for the masses, if you will. But in that book, Diane alleged that her father molested her at age 11, but that the molestation ended and then he just became more of a typical father. Yeah, that's right. I had to read that again because I'm just not sure if I believe that.
Oh, let bygones be bygones. Now he's just your dad.
Typical dad.
He was a monster, but now he's just your dad. Yeah, no, doesn't work.
At age 14, things started to change now because of a little charm school, that is, charm school. Her parents decided that she would and could go to a charm school. Now, at the school, she learned how to take better care of herself. She's also 14. She's getting in that puberty and all that stuff, but she starts doing her hair, curling it, wearing a little bit of makeup, starts buying clothes that are kind of, trendy. And all of this leads to the one thing it happens. Boys. That's right, boys. Now, it's here that Diane loved all the attention that she got from boys. And this is what she had been craving for so long anyway, and continued to do throughout her life, as we know. One of those boys that showed her so much attention was a boy by the name of Stephen Downs. The two fell for each other. After graduation, Steve went into the Navy and she went to the Pacific Coast Baptist Bible College. Now, Diane would find herself expelled from Bible College for, you ready? I didn't even know this is a thing. I don't think it would be today, but maybe. Promiscuity. So she got kicked out of Bible school for promiscuity.
You would probably get you kicked out nowadays, yeah.
Would it? I mean, it would at Brigham Young, I would guess, but would it there? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole wait to your marriage type thing. Keep
She
yourself
didn't wait
pure.
till she was married, Jen.
That's why she's kicked out of school, I guess. Or Bible school, whatever it is.
When Steve returned from his stint in the Navy, the couple wed on November 13th, 1973. And it was pretty clear right from the get-go, the marriage was not a great one. Two young adults trying to make their way both found out pretty quick that marriage was not all wine and roses, as they say. Diane did really enjoy one thing about their marriage, and that was being pregnant. She would say that she really enjoyed being pregnant, thriving on the idea of having someone love you and be dependent on you. She loved that. After the birth
Till a point. Yeah. Okay.
After the birth of her first daughter, Christy, in October 1974, reality of marriage came back. And now she has a baby in tow as well. Right. So it's all that stuff she didn't like about the marriage. And now you have a baby too.
Mm-hmm.
Desperate to feel like she did when she was pregnant, she did it again. Her second child, Cheryl, came into the world January 1976. It is here that the cycle of Diane leaving Steve only to come back again started. Now, this went on several times when Diane realized just what she needed to be happy once again, Jen. What does she need to be happy again?
A baby.
That's right.
She loves her
Another
babies.
baby. However, Steve's probably not going to be very happy with this idea, especially since she decided to do this not with her husband. That's right. She just decided to pick a random fella she worked with at her job. I think the paper called him a stud or stud horse, something like that. And his name was Danny. The baby, named Danny, would be born in December 1979. Now, at first, Steve decided to accept this deal. You know, he's going to try to be the best father he can to this other man's baby. But that only lasted for so long. And within the next year, Steve and Diane would divorce. Now, can you believe that? She wants to have a baby, but she just goes out and gets pregnant by another man that she works with. After the couple divorced, she moved in with Danny's dad for a little bit. And with this move, friends and family would say things changed. You know, perhaps it was her being single or single-ish. The kids were no longer her top priority. She would often dump the kids on anyone who would babysit them. And it's obvious to those around them that the children were not getting the attention from her that they once did. So I'm guessing that maybe she kind of enjoyed the idea of being single and just would often, you know, hey, I'm going to go out tonight, and then dump off the kids with like the neighbor or whoever would be around to babysit them. 1981, Diane landed a job at the U.S. Postal Office in Chandler. Now, this is where she met the married man of her dreams. At this point, investigators need to see if they had enough to bring charges against the woman that they are positive attempted to murder all three of her children and succeeded on doing so with just one. Thank goodness. What they had was spent bullet casings from the scene of the crime, a bloody Nissan, letters that Diane had written to her ex, and the two people, Steve and the ex, who both said that Diane did have a third gun, not the two that she kept insisting she had. She actually had three. An expert who examined the gun bullets and the shell casings believed that the unspent bullets that were found in Diane's house, and how they did this, I don't know. And I had to think about how to write this because I wanted to make sure it came across right. So they found some unspent bullets, the same kind that were probably used in the shooting of her children. But the experts were able to almost positively say that those bullets in her house had been at one time in the gun that she used. So to put that in reality, she took the bullets, put them in the gun, took the gun out, shot her kids, and then took the leftover bullets and takes them back to her house and puts them back in the box, the bullet box. Is that odd?
I guess there would be some, I would think so.
There were some marks on them to show that they had been in the chamber. But to think about her mind, like, what do you say? That's just a strange behavior, I think. Like, we didn't use these bullets. Let's save them. What?
Were they her, or was it her husband's gun, or was it her gun?
It was her gun. It was her gun. She had bought guns because being a postal employee, mail carrier, she wanted to have protection.
Okay. So she was carrying when she just bought. Now, I don't understand. I don't get her thinking of it. So, but does it matter if we get it or not?
Like, are you cheap? Are you that cheap? The bullets that weren't used to fatally kill your one child and almost devastate the other two.
She didn't want to have her gun loaded, maybe. I don't know. I don't know her thinking of it.
Get rid of the bullets
and we never
somewhere
will.
Else. No, we won't. We won't. You're right.
Well, they're expensive. Ammunition's expensive. So, or at least it is now, or it was. I don't know. That's what I hear. Anyway,
the timeline that detectives put together goes like this. After talking to her friend Heather, they believe she left Heather's house at 9:45 p.m. Diane arrived at the hospital at 10:48 p.m. Now, due to the estimated drive time to the hospital, they believe the shooting occurred right around 10:15. Here's where they start thinking, interesting. They find a witness, and what he has to say, well, it says a lot. The man, whose name's Joseph Inman, said that on the night of the incident, he ran into a car, a Nissan, on Old Mohawk Road around 10:20. So police saying that the shooting occurred right at 10:15. This would be about 5 minutes after the kids were shot. The man made a note of the exact time because the car was moving so slow in front of him. And he said it was moving about 5 to 7 miles per hour. Now, being that the children had already been shot, most mothers, I would think, fathers, anybody for that matter, would be driving like a banshee to get to the hospital. Am I right? She's not even going the speed limit. She's going 5 to 7 miles per hour. So I think we can pretty much guess why she's doing that. She's driving slow because she wants her children to pass away. Mm-hmm. They're not gone yet. Absolutely unthinkable. There's also the idea that maybe she had a change of heart and she was kind of debating, but I don't think it's that. I think that they were shot.
If she had a change of heart, you would think that she'd be rushing to the hospital to make sure that they're saved.
Even though it's not a lot of evidence, Lane County agreed to assemble a grand jury to take a deeper look at all this, and they want to talk to all those involved, Diane included. The court decided first that the children needed to be put into protective custody, and Diane would not be able to see them during this trial, the grand jury testimony, all that stuff. So she doesn't get to see them. Now, Danny's still under medical care and was not released, so the constant guard had to remain on duty with him. Now, Christy's whereabouts remained a secret because they needed to make sure nothing would happen to her since she was the one who knew the truth. She was old enough to speak and relay the truth. Even at this point, she had not yet done so.
She's probably scared.
It's
who do you trust if you can't trust your mom?
It took a long time to get the truth, but we'll get to that. As the investigation is winding up, layoffs hit the sheriff's office. Now, can you believe that? I never even thought that'd be a problem, but I guess it is. Mm-hmm. So all of the district attorney's top investigators are laid off. So while their office is scrambling to get the investigation back on track and moving forward, Diane, well, she just found herself, she just deemed herself a media darling, a little media celebrity. There's a reporter or camera nearby. Diane was front and center. She loved the attention, and more times than not, she was revealing information about not only herself, but the crime. Some of the papers, the ones who really liked the salaciousness, this was before TMZ, but I would say it would be the newspapers like TMZ, gave her a moniker. You know what it is? You got to think about the time and stuff. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Princess Di, as in D-I-E.
Oh, Jesus.
Princess Di, D-I-E, right?
That's horrible.
But one interview that she did, and I wanted to mention it here because it's chilling. So they asked her to get into the car to do like a live reenactment of what happened. Now, her arm is still in a sling. It's in a sling. The officer or whatever's outside, and she's laughing. She's giggling, about all the, it's just really creepy, but that's not the creepy part. So she gets into the car and she hits her arm on the steering wheel and she grabs it and she's like, oh my God, that hurt worse than and then she stopped herself. And the officer said that hurt worse than when you shot yourself that night, right? That's what she was going to say, or that's what they think she was going to say. And she really does. She just like giggles. She stops herself. It's creepy. Like it makes your hair stand up on your back of your neck.
She's disgusting.
So up until this point, they've been, they kind of let Diane be Diane, but now they're tired of this and they're going to get tough with her. Diane comes and meets with detectives, and this time she had some new information, Jen. This is what she'd do. She said, well, she knew who the killer was. She knew him. She had a name for him, too. Now, mind you, she's never told detectives this until now. She can't really tell him much more than that, but this comes up interesting later, something regarding this bushy-haired man that she thinks she knows. So after a series of questions, Diane unable to answer them, officers ask her point blank, "Did you kill your children?" And with that, she told them that they were fucked up and walked out. The interview was over. And they honestly have her like screaming at them and walking out.
Like, she's not going to admit it.
No, but she just says now that I know who it is. I know who it is. And you're just too, later on, I think it was on Oprah or one of the other shows that I watched, like the Dateline or it was 2020 from back then. She said that, I know the man's name and you don't even care and I'm not going to give it to you. It was something like that. And I was like, are you like 5? It was for attention. Due to her situation and maybe the fear of going to court for this, Diane went back to say what she knew. And she went in and guess what, Jen? She wanted that love back. So she went out and found herself a man, got pregnant again.
Oh, of course she did.
So she's pregnant by the time they go to trial. Now, in that TV interview that I believe it was with 2020, I can't remember because, like I said, I watched all of them. But she says this. Now, just like the audience, you could hear the audience go, oh.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, "I got pregnant because I miss Christy and I miss Danny and I miss Cheryl so much. You can't replace children, but you can replace the effect that they give you. And they give me love. They give me satisfaction. They give me stability. They give me a reason to live and a reason to be happy." Can't replace children, but you can just get pregnant again, I guess. After 9 months of interviewing all the people involved in the case, including Diane, an indictment was handed down. The charges were 1 charge of murder, 2 charges of attempted murder, and 2 charges of criminal assault. On February 28, 1984, Diane was arrested and taken into custody at her place of work. Needless to say, America was more than fascinated by this crime. Mm-hmm. Now, you have to remember this was before Susan Smith, Andrea Yates, or Paula Sims, all of which, killed their children. Reporters and magazines fought over how to get more and more coverage of this story. I mean, this was before 24-hour news, so it was everywhere.
Oh,
all the papers.
I do know it was everywhere. We were alive back then, don't you remember?
I know. Barely. Diane hired a high-profile lawyer named Melvin Belli, but he couldn't take the case on right away. He had asked that he wanted the case, but he was working on something else, and so he wanted to see if they could push the trial back. The judge was like, nope, we've waited long enough. That's not going to happen. Diane then went and hired a man named Jim Jagger. The trial opened on May 10th, 1984 in Eugene at the Lane County Courthouse. The jury panel consisted of 9 women. The judge, Judge Foote, was the same person who took Christy and Danny away from Diane and put them into protective custody. So this judge is already a little familiar with Diane and her shenanigans, shall we say. The prosecution tried to prove that Diane fell in love with a married man who did not want kids. And so she just got rid of the kids or wanted to get rid of the kids to get and keep her man. Now, the defense, on the other hand, admitted that Diane had love and maybe even an obsession with her former lover, but that she would never, ever hurt her children, partly because she knew the real pain since she was molested as a child, and that bushy-haired stranger, to them, was all too real. On May 14th, the defense team took the jury on a field trip out to Old Mohawk Road to see for themselves where the crime happened and get a sense of what it was like in the dark for those little babies being shot there. During testimony from witnesses, much information was shared. Nurse Rose Martin testified about how Diane acted when she came to the hospital to see her close-to-death children and didn't even shed a tear. Nurse Martin shared something Diane said to her. You can't even make this up. I'm not kidding. So the nurse on the stand says that Diane came to her and asked her how the children were, and that the nurse said the doctors were in there working on them. And this all stuck out. The next phrase stuck out to the nurse because she can't believe a mom would say that. So she says, quote, "And then she, the mother, laughed," Diane, "and she said, 'Only the best for my kids.' And then she laughed again and said, 'Well, I have good insurance.'" That is what she said as her children are being worked on to save their life.
She's horrible. I mean,
Dr. John Mackey testified she was extremely composed. She was unbelievably composed. I couldn't believe she was a family member. There were no tears, no disbelief, know, why did this happen to me? The one witness everyone was anxious to hear from was the one that would tug at heartstrings everywhere. Little Christy, who had been under a psychologist's care, was getting ready for the day. As she came to the stand, the little girl was crying. The district attorney, Hughie, that I mentioned earlier, who started collecting the evidence from the get-go, knowing something was not right, was careful to help usher her to the stand, and he was very kind with her. He even gave her a Kleenex, and he would pause for a moment, let her regain her composure before moving on with questioning. You could see the pain on the little girl's face, but you could also see the pain on the prosecutor's face. It was evident he cared for this little girl, and it pained him to have to drag her through all this again. It was pretty clear. Mr. Hughie began his testimony simply as he asked her general questions about herself, the little girl, surely in an effort to calm her before moving into the more difficult information that he needed to get. He was careful with his questioning, but when he was ready, he went straight for it. What did your mother do to you children? And then Christy said, she leaned over the back seat and shot Danny. What happened then? He prompted her. What happened after Danny got shot? Do you remember when you got shot? He asked her. Yeah, she answered. Who shot you? My mom, she said simply. That was cut and pasted directly from testimony. It was not easy for Christy to get to the point. In fact, it had taken a long time to get here. The psychologist had to win her trust and friendship, as we talked about earlier. And, many of the days when the psychologist would come in, they wouldn't even bring this up. They would just hang out, bond, talk, play games, whatever the case may be. On the other days, the psychologist would play games with Christy, or rather, she worked them in a game sort of way. So Christy made progress and was getting healthy physically and out of the hospital. The doctor would give Christy a piece of paper and ask her to write the name of the person who shot them. But then as soon as Christy did, Christy could crumple it up and throw it in the fireplace. So the name's getting out there. This was ingenious. Mm-hmm. Name's getting out there, but the only one that gets to see it is Christy, for now. The truth is going up in flames, right? Literally. Mm-hmm. So the doctor would continue to do this with Christy until she felt comfortable sharing the name on the paper. And unfortunately, the name was the one which we are all familiar with now. That was it. A witness who lived through this nightmare just named the person who did it. The person who should, above all others, love them the most in the world, their mother. The verdict was unanimous, and it came down on June 14th, 1984. Diane Downs was guilty of attempted murder in the first degree, guilty of 2 counts of attempted murder in the first degree, and guilty of first-degree assault. Guilty of another count of first-degree assault, and guilty of the murder of her second child, Cheryl Lynn. After the verdict, but before sentencing could occur, Jen, because she showed up to trial pregnant, so they took a little break before sentencing, and Diane Downs delivered a healthy baby girl, whom she would name Amy. Now, the father of the baby didn't want anything to do with the child, probably because he didn't really realize
the stigma that's going on.
What she was doing, because Diane had told a friend that she was ovulating, and she knew exactly when she would conceive, so she purposely went to this guy to get pregnant. Since Oregon did not have the death penalty in 1984, Diane Downs was given a life sentence plus 50 years for using a gun. Amy was adopted by a family and is around 38 years old today. In 1987, Diane briefly, now this story, you cannot make this up. I actually wrote here, you cannot make this up. 1987, Diane briefly escaped from the Oregon Women's Correctional Center where she had been incarcerated. Now, I bet you're wondering, where in the world is she going to go? Where's she going to go?
Whose house?
You said, yeah. I wrote, if you said Disneyland, you're close. She was going to make it all the way out to California, Jen, because you know what? That man that she said that she knew shot her, she had heard that he was living in California. So she was going to hightail it out to California and find him. Now, I just, I don't even know what to say, but I wrote here in the you can't make this stuff up room, Diane decided to make a little pit stop on her way out to California. You ready? Mm-hmm. I wrote this. I'd ask you to guess, but you wouldn't get it right. And that's the truth, because it seems like Diane made friends with this lady in prison. And this lady told her all about this man that she had on the outside, her husband, and that he was such a good guy and he was just really a darling guy and all that stuff. So Diane, before going to California, she decides to go hit up this woman's husband. And so she stays there and shacks up with him for like 2 weeks.
Is the woman still in prison? The man's wife?
Well, she was at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know if she is now today, but so she just went to go shack up with the man for a little bit over 2 weeks before she was recaptured. To ensure any future trips to California would be a little bit more difficult, Diane was sent to the High Maximum Clinton Correctional Institution in New Jersey, where she sits today. Now, Christy and Danny survived the ordeal. Danny is confined to a wheelchair due to the shooting. And you can't make this up. Like, I had to reread this because I was like, that can't be right. In what is seriously a made-for-TV ending or a happily ever after, Christy and Danny were adopted by parents who would give them the love that they'd always needed. And that is none other than, you ready? District Attorney Fred and Joanne Hughey, the very man that tried the case.
Good for them.
Can you believe that? That's why I think it was so hard to see her on the stand, because he really did genuinely
care about her.
Yeah.
Good for them. Like they needed that love and that security.
Sure did. So if you get bored one day, go check out her interviews with Oprah. And I think it's 2020. I'm almost positive, but she made the rounds. But she would just narcissist to the nth degree and just something else. Also, the book Small Sacrifices by Ann Rule. And Ann Rule is the famous Ted Bundy person, A Stranger. What's the name of that book? I just totally forgot. A Stranger.
I don't know. I've honestly not really ever read a lot of Ann Rule's books. But she used to work with Ted Bundy at the suicide hotline, correct?
Yeah,
Suicide
totally
crisis.
I have the book A Stranger. I can't believe I
Let
can't
me look
remember.
it up. Ann Rule,
I'm looking
Ted
it up
Bundy.
right now.
Stranger Beside Me.
I was going to say A Stranger in My Bed. I knew that wasn't it. So yeah, Stranger Beside Me, Ann Rule. And then also Dead by Sunset, just a little plug. And I know I've plugged it on the show before. A long time ago, I think in our first year, she wrote that too. That's really good too.
Oh, she had written a ton.
I think she's written over 36 books, Jen, now that you mention it. Because on one of those TV shows, they talked to her before she passed away. She has since passed away, but one of them, the Oprah one. So there's two that Oprah did, but the one, I'm telling you, you got to watch this. It makes some, I got it off YouTube, but it's, Ann Rule is in the studio with Oprah, and then Diane is on the TV coming live from the prison. That's when she made that comment about you can't replace children, but you can replace the feeling that they give you. She liked to get pregnant, but she kept going, "Ann, you're a liar. You're a liar." You just, like, the audience was laughing. They're like, she's just not right. Like, she just ain't right. She ain't right. So anyway, check it out. This was one of those stories that I just,
Well, she's, it's unreal.
It is unreal. So that is the story of Diane Downs, who still proclaims her innocence today in prison.
She's been up for parole many, many times, and I think her parole's coming up here shortly, but she'll never get released.
No. And the fact that the only amount of gunshots were the ones fired directly to their chest. Nobody is going to be able to, a stranger, come up into a car. I mean, you couldn't do that. To hit 3 people in the various parts of the car in their chest without a couple misfires or a couple other shots. It just doesn't happen unless you're sitting right there with them. And the children, you're not going to be scared of your mom, so you're not going to move. Whereas if it was a stranger, I'm sure that they would have, bent over or huddled down. All of the wounds would not have been exact.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So she is just not a nice person. And that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, are you watching anything good?
Anyway, I just looked up. Ann Rule has written close to 40 books. I think 37 is.
3 dozen. That makes 36.
Yep,
I
there
do
you
believe.
go.
Is it 12 times 3? 36?
Mm-hmm.
Her daughter was on one of those interviews and said that.
37 books. Yeah, she died at 83 in 2015, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of stuff. I won't be able to remember them all. I've watched the Weird Al Yankovic, watched that last night because my husband and daughter are huge Weird Al fans.
And your good friend was watching it and told you that you guys would like it for sure because it's pretty kitschy.
Oh, yeah, we were we were planning to watch it on Friday night, but the girl had plans, so we watched it last
cute.
night.
I mean,
it's a parody. He does parodies.
Yeah,
That's what he does. They fully enjoyed it 100%. I thought it was cute, but I've been dragged to see him in concert twice. And he puts on a really good concert, believe it or not. I mean, he really does. He's very talented. Let's see, what else did I watch? Very talented Billy from our St. Elmo's film.
Tenet thing that I told you to watch?
I got the first episode or two down. It's kind of not really a fan
I
of
liked
it.
it. I did. I really liked it. I thought it was good.
I like I like David Tennant, as we all know, and I like Stanley Tucci a lot.
Didn't you like the premise? I like the idea of it.
Yeah, but I just thought the premise is fine, but I thought how the vicar lands himself in trouble was
A little
pretty
over the top.
stupid.
So did I.
Yeah.
But
I'm just Jesus. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think that would actually happen, but who am I? We see all kinds of shit, don't we?
Say, Jen. Come on now. Come on now.
Now you keep talking and I can't listen. What have you, or I can't think. What else have you watched?
2020's latest episode was on the Girl Scout murders.
Yep.
That was good. I watched that this morning.
Yep.
That was good.
They solved that this year. They've solved a
Well, it's still not solved, but it's solved, but it's not solved. Like they've cut all the other suspects out, but the one that went to trial for it was found not guilty.
Right.
But yeah. So,
but he's dead now, correct?
He's dead.
Yeah, so they can't do anything, but technically it's solved.
No, they're testing some DNA, but it's...
I thought they tested DNA. I thought it's already been tested, and they proved that it was him.
This is the one that aired last night, so I don't think so, but maybe they're wrong.
Oh, no, I could have sworn that
all the other suspects they have ruled out,
right.
But they can't rule him in. For instance, the newspaper that was found in holding the batteries in the flashlight, the other half of that was found at where he was staying. So that right there, I think that's a pretty good indication that he's the killer. But they have to, I guess, wait to get more conclusive DNA.
So technically, it's not solved, but
it's still open. Yeah.
Due to what it says here, due to the developments in the DNA-based evidence since 1970s, Mays County Police believe they have an idea who the killer is. Mm-hmm. So technically, it's not solved, but
that's what I said.
Right.
But also, 2020 just did a show on it. So
I know. That's just.
I'm just saying.
I've been watching the Guillermo del Toro's Cabinets of Curiosity.
I haven't started that yet.
Those have been pretty good. Some of them not so much, but others have been great. Midnight Club I watched that I loved. I pulled up The School of Good and Evil. We watched. That was cute. Very kid. It's a teenager show, but it was cute. I like it. Very kind of Harry Potter meets fairy tale-ish type thing. It was cute. It was fun for what it was. Costumes were great. Very excited to hear that my Marvelous Mrs. Maisel got canceled. Pissed off about that. Not happy about that at all.
Why'd it get canceled?
Don't know. Just did. Didn't read why. But otherwise, I think that's it that I've watched.
Okay.
Trying to think anything else.
Yeah, there's stuff out there to be had.
Oh, there's lots.
Yeah. Oh, Orgasm on Netflix. Watched that yesterday about that sex cult. That is something else too. Whew.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah. Very in the vein of, was it Nexium? That guy?
Oh, yeah.
Keith? Whatever his name was? Yeah. Except it's female. But woo. Yeah. It's something else too. It's pretty... Yeah. FBI is investigating that though. So hopefully something will come out of that. But that's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
So I guess, stay tuned. And until then, remember, lock your doors.
And keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya.
Today's episode was researched and written by me, Cam. For more information about this episode, as well as all the sources I used, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by hosts Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertesi from We Talk of Dreams. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from October Pod VHS. Our True Crime Podcast is executive produced by Nico Vertesi and Dick Bain. Make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod. You can email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. If you really like the show, make sure to check out our Patreon at Our True Crime Podcast. Our True Crime Podcast is an OTC production.